decision hinged on the fact that the program was considered to be narrowly tailored. All right, so that's the first thing. All right. Secondly, let me talk about then what are the goals in the state program and the federal program, and the extent to which those goals have been met, and the extent to which they have been met for different groups. All right, the goal in the state program, and this was for fiscal year 2008. The goal in the state program was 11%. All right. The MBE, WBE utilization between fiscal 2004 through fiscal 2008 was 9.4%. So there was a shortfall in regards to the goal and the utilization, but the utilization was not far below the goal, but there was a difference. All right, in terms of race and gender neutral attainment, which is very important. In other words, you have to see what are these programs, how much difference have these programs mattered. And I want to talk particularly about one program, the SBE program, Small Business Enterprise Program, which I consider to be a very, very important program insofar as creating opportunities for minority and women contractors. All right, the SBE program. So when you add up the sum total of all of those programs, I mentioned earlier that there's a lot of race and neutral activities and programs going on. Right, so what's the sum total of all of that in regards to their impact? Well, for MBEs, it accounted for only 1.9% of total utilization. And for WBEs, only 1.7%. All right, so you got 9.4% and then less than 2% utilization generated by race and neutral programs. All right, now get to the implications of that. In the federal program, the average goal over the last 4 years was 10.8%. DBE utilization was 8%. Race and gender neutral utilization was 1.7%. Okay? Now, what do we derive from that? Right. What's the obvious inference from all of that? Well, the obvious inference is that you can't make it with race and gender neutral programs, right? But for the aspirational goals that have been set on the federal program and the goals that are set on the state program, then the utilization of minorities and women would be much lower than it currently is. So that's very important. That's a major conclusion, all right? Because one of the demands of conducting a disparity study is, but for the program, what would happen? Okay. All right. MBE utilization, as I mentioned, on state projects averaged 9.4%, meaning they fell short of the goal by 1.6%. Now, within state projects, how did it break down between MBEs and WBEs? All right. 4.7% of awards went to MBEs, and 4.7% went to WBEs in the state program. Okay. All right. Federal program. DBE utilization overall, as I mentioned earlier, was 8%. How did it break down among, while all of the companies in the federal program are certified as DBEs, but we also cross-reference them to their MBE certification status or WBE certification status. Is everybody with me? All right, if I'm going too fast or shouting out too many statistics, stop me. You know, I'm an economist, so all I do is play in numbers. So just feel free to stop me if you want me to back up and cover something again. All right. So I said overall, it was 8%. They fell short of the goal by 2.1%. DBE utilization, meaning that companies that are certified DBEs, but also are MBEs, meaning mainly minority companies, their utilization was 1.7%. And the utilization of DBEs that also had WBE certification was 6.2%. So a big difference. All right. Another one of the major findings of the study. What we find within the study is that there is a big difference, a big unevenness in the utilization of minorities and women in the state program versus the utilization of minorities and women in the federal program. All right. All right, and I have tables here that go through every category, and I'm not going to talk about all of those. I mean, I'm going to hit some of the highlights, but you will find in the executive summary a table that summarizes availability for every group, whether they're prime contractors or subcontractors in the state and the federal program, or whether they're in the SBE program, whether it's central contracting, or so on and so forth. There are tables that talk about all of that. Let me just kind of go through that and pluck out what I think are some of the most important facts. All right, and then we can come back to that, and then I'll talk about what the implications are. All right. Overall, all right, what is the overall availability in a disparity study? And what's my time? Am I running? How's my time? I need about maybe 5 or 10 more minutes. Is it? Yeah. That's going to be okay. All right. Overall, all right. In a disparity study, what you have to do is you have to compare the availability of firms. That is, how many firms are, let me back up, let me not even say availability. How many firms are ready, willing, and able to do work in comparison to the percent of work that those firms get? That's the fundamental issue that you have to analyze in a disparity study. Now, when you look at that issue, the first thing you look at is the number of firms that are available in each industry group, right? And we typically call that availability. But we have to go beyond that and also talk about capacity, how much work they do. And we estimated both of those things, and I won't get into the techniques of how we did it, but if you want to know it, you're going to ask me and I'll tell you how we did it. We had to use a statistical process, and it's the same process that the federal government uses, because I recommended the process to the federal government. And so we use the same one here that we use for the federal government. Okay. All right. Availability of firms in prime contractors and subcontractors across all categories. DBEs 20.3%. Okay, across all categories, 20.3%. If you look at prime contractors, DBEs who are prime contractors, 6.9%, and DBEs who are subcontractors, 21.6%. Okay. All right. So you got that. Overall, 20.3, prime 6.9, subcontractors 21.6. Prime contractors 6.9, subcontractors 21.6. Capacity. Capacity. What is the capacity of all firms that are DBEs to engage in work for NCDOT? The overall capacity we estimated is 15.1%. All right. Now, what do we mean by that? Without going into a lot of it, what we did, the way we estimated it is that looked at the volume of work that they're capable of doing. If you can take into consideration at the same time how many years they've been in operation, the industry that they work in, whether they are prime contractor or subcontractor, how many divisions of the state that they indicate that they are available to work in. We look at their DBE and non-DBE status, and finally we look at their revenue. Now, the obvious thing you're going to say is that, well, you know, the revenue is influenced by discrimination. You're right, and we adjusted for that. So what we do is we take out revenue and find out what that revenue is relative to all of those characteristics for the non-DBEs. And then once we determine what that relationship is, we assign that same relationship to the DBEs. So now we adjust their revenue up for what it should be if they were treated just like non-DBEs. You with me? That's how we get to capacity. All right. So 15.1% overall. Capacity for prime contractors, DBEs, 7.6%. Capacity for DBE subcontractors, 47.9%. All right. Now, in setting the goal, and I don't tell you how to set, all let's do is I'm going to give you the facts, and NCDOT and the board will have to decide how they set the goal. One of the most important factors to consider in setting goals is capacity and not just availability. And that's one of the reasons why we estimate capacity. All right. So let me talk about percentage utilization. Okay? And I'm going to come back to this because this is important in the recommendations. The SBE program. Right, let me first start with the SBE program. In my opinion, that was, as a consultant, that program impressed me the most in looking at what they were doing. That what you'll find, let me step back and tell you what you'll find as you wade through all of these numbers. Here's what you're going to find. In the prime contracting areas, very, very, very little utilization of DBEs, NMWBEs, very little. In fact, surprisingly little. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. In subcontracting, just the opposite, right? Significant levels of utilization.